why is this show lasted so long compared to our modern shows right now. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a retro review of Smallville. If you guys are new here, you can hit that subscribe button and bell to get notified for whenever I post, because I post videos like this every single week. Now, if you guys don't know, the story of Smallville is about a young Clark Kent and his road in becoming Smallville. And this show went from WB all the way to the CW from 2001 to 2011. That's 10 years of watching the story develop. One of the accomplishments of Smallville is that it is considered to be the longest comic book show that have ever been run on a TV network, and that is for 10 seasons. None other comic book show lasted roughly 10 seasons. Only Smallville has that feat in its belt. That's why Smallville is considered to be one of the best comic book shows in our generation. Now, the only question that goes through my mind is, why is this show lasted so long compared to our modern shows right now? Marvel released in the early 2000s, before the superhero genre became a global phenomenon. Like, this show is considered to be one of the best because this show came out of nowhere. This show came out before Spider-Man was a thing, and Batman Begins was nowhere near the horizons, and this movie came out even before the Avengers was even established. The reason why this show works so well is because this show is technically an origin story of Superman. It's a coming of age story about a teenager that will one day become the Man of Steel. This show is about a superhero in training, a character-driven story, but with supernatural elements woven in between those character developments. Now, before I continue, let's take this a step backwards. Let's pretend you have never heard about the show and you don't even know who Superman was. At the glance, you will have no idea this show was about Superboy become Superman. Or you don't even know this will be a superhero show because the superhero elements go like later in the seasons. Like the first half of the show, like the first 3 or 4 seasons, it's like just a character-driven story about a week of the week. Like Clark takes down a bad guy, done, next episode, repeat until like season 4 where the Superman lore comes full swing in coming a season-long villain. The show has an advantage because both superhero fans from the comics will love the show, and viewers who aren't a big fan of superheroes will also enjoy the show because, like I said, like this show, the forefront of the show is the character development of Clark Kent, while the superhero element comes secondary, so anyone can enjoy this show. Everyone knows that this show, like more of being a Superman show, the theme of the show is about growing up. On top of that, in this story, Clark Kent is trying to find his place in the world. Like season 2 or season 3, he starts to question why is he on Earth. The whole journey of the show deals with how he can learn about using disabilities and how to keep it a secret. One of the things that I enjoy about the show is when Krypton blew up and when Clark arrives on Earth, kryptonite crystals also landed on Earth, and that results into other people gaining some abilities. But the show kept its focus. This show introduces some of the Justice Leaguers. You see Fort Allen, the grandson of Barry Allen, for Flash. Well, here he calls himself Impulse, like we know. Then we have Aquaman, Cyborg, and Green Arrow. And it's the first show that introduces a version of the Justice League. But this show succeeds because it keeps his focus on Clark Kent. But Clark Kent isn't alone in this world. He also develops friends from the show. Pete Ross, which can be translated into a Cisco type character and becoming Clark's best friend, and who he eventually reveals his identity to in season 2. Then of course we have Clark's first love, Lana Lang, which is the girl next door that everyone wants to have. First half of the show, Lana Lang was pretty much the focus of the show, and then we have everyone's best sidekick of all time, and that is Sullivan. We relate to her as the brains of the team, and of course if you watch Arrow, Chloe is pretty much a better version of Felicity Smoke in Arrow. But out of all the characters, there are two main characters that for me has to be on par with Clark Kent, and that is Ma and Pa Kent. We all know Ma and Pa Kent tries to protect Clark at a young age, but this show expands the mythos of Superman and develop these characters as a more prominent role, well, at least for the first half of the show. And the acting of both Ma and Pa Kent is incredible. Like, this character's works is that both Ma and Pa Kent are opposites to each other. Martha is the more caring and loving mother, while Jonathan Kent is more harsh towards Clark, because now Jonathan, without realizing it, like, Jonathan knows that Clark is someone special, and it's better to keep his secret, because if the wrong people finds out who Clark really is, they can do experiments on Clark and turn him into a weapon, like every supervillain that we know and love. But this show isn't complete without its main villain of the show, and of course we know him. We love him. The main villain of the show is of course Lex Luthor, which at the beginning he is one of Clark's best friends from the show. The MVP of the show has to be Lex Luthor. Like, Michael Rosenbaum's portrayal of Lex Luthor has to be the definitive portrayal of Lex Luthor that I've seen. This show makes Lex Luthor a more compelling character than an actual villain to the show. Like what we've seen today in the Arrowverse, like the villains are evil because they want to be evil. But Smallville, like, Lex Luthor doesn't start off as a villain. Like, towards the first half of the show, he wants to help Clark and the Kent. He wants to protect Clark from his father, which at the beginning, like, Lionel Luthor is a villain, but throughout the show we develop more Lex's backstory and learn that will become a villain of the show. The very first scene when Clark arrives on Earth, like, the first thing he does is save Lex Luthor, and I think that builds the relationship between both Lex and Clark, saying that from that point we're friends. But deep down we know that Lex knows that Clark is hiding something from him. That is Lex's goal in the show, is to find out who Clark really is, because he knows that Clark is keeping secrets from him. So I think these core characters define why Smallville is a great show, because other than the story, the characters are the most important things in a show, because if you don't care about a show, then people won't invest on these characters. Aside from the story being Clark's journey in becoming Superman, the show can also be viewed as Lex's journey in becoming his arch nemesis. That works well because towards the first half of the show, we see Lex as being Clark's best friend, even though he's trying to find out what happened on the day that he drowned and remarkably saved without even a scratch. But towards the second half of the show, he becomes more sinister and on defense on Clark. But I think that the MVPs of the show is both Clark and Lex's character development and chemistry between the two, because without them, the show would be just a generic show. That's one of the credits that I give to Michael Rosenbaum, because his acting makes you believe that Lex is not what he seems and becoming that evil mastermind that we know and love. Like, for me, I think Michael Rosenbaum has to be the best Lex Luthor that I've seen on screen. Now, reviewing this show could take me a while, because there are so many good things about this show that I want to mention, that if I do, this video is going to be an hour long, and I don't want that. So, cover the core basics of what the show is about. I'm not going to actually review my 2 cents of Smallville. Now, starting off from season 1, like, one of the best episodes from season 1 has to be the first 4 episodes, because it sets up the dynamic and chemistry between Clark and his adoptive parents. And they built the show as more of a family show and more character-driven drama than like, oh look, superhero action. Like the core of the show has to be a family drama show, and I really love the show so much because of that premise alone. Like, yes, we all know that the show is gonna be about Superman, but like at first the show is about growing up and childhood and learning to grow up. But after seeing the Arrowverse, the only gripe that I have about the early season is that they decided to have a weekly villain, like modern day Arrowverse having like a villain of the week type scenario and having Clark to take him down, but without revealing his identity. But knowing that, like, it's a good formula. Like, see Smallville as kind of like those roadmap and stepping stones of what we know as Arrow. I care about the character development first and the characters, because if I'm investing into the characters, that means I'm invested into the show or the movie. But if I'm not investing in none of the characters, then I won't bother or continue watching. So I believe that this 4 episodes of season 1 has to be the meat in the core of what the show is really about, and which is family and self-discovery. Short season 3 and season 4, like the show dips in ratings a little bit, and that's not just me. Like I think everyone says that because these 2 seasons like deals with more about the Shakti caves and what it represents with Clark. The whole magic stones elements along with the caves, it's a little bit confusing and it drags the season longer. For me, like those elements of the plot doesn't really need it to be there because it doesn't move Clark forward into his career of being Superman. For me, I think the scenes and these elements from season 3 and 4 load the progression of Clark and become Superman. The best part of the second half is the introduction of more Superman type characters. Before we got the introduction of Lois Lane, as well as we gained the introduction of Jimmy Olsen. Episodes 5 through 7 keep going into the momentum of the story journey of Superman. For me, I love the entire show. The worst season for me has been in season 6 with having the whole Lana Lang marrying Lex. For me, like that whole plot it's awful. It has to be one of the worst plots I've seen in TV. If that season was removed or replaced with something different, then it will improve the show even better. And one of my favorite things that I've seen through the show is that it introduces a version of the Justice League from the comics, because we have Clark interacting with Bart Allen, then he meets Aquaman, the show they call him AC, and we get Cyborg and the Green Arrow himself, or Green. And what's funny, because towards the end of the show it says the origin of Arrow was meant to be a spin-off of Justin Hartley's portrayal of Green Arrow, but things fell through and the script has to be reworked, and it turned out to be the birth of the Arrowverse. But one of the highlights of the series is the introduction of Supergirl, of Kara Danvers. Like having Supergirl in the show, well, for me it was a bit underwhelming because the show didn't really do that much with her. Like for me, I think that's why the Arrowverse succeeds with the third interpretation of Supergirl. Smallville could have handled Supergirl a bit differently. One of my favorite episodes of the entire series, it has to be the 100th episode in season 5, because this episode felt like a movie. The entire show up to that point was leading up to the 100th episode where Clark is finally becoming that Superman persona, and we finally come to see the death of Jonathan Kent, which was well done. Dying from a heart attack was more emotional than like dying from a tornado in Man of Steel. I cried in that scene because the characters meant something to me at this point, and like the whole family dynamic was improved. In season 6 we start losing that family dynamic when of course Martha Kent also leaves the show, leaving only Clark Kent to be alone, and at this point he's already a grown man and closer to becoming that Superman persona. Having both Ma and Kent leave the show makes Clark Kent more room to grow as a character and learning about what's the meaning of being a true hero. Season 7 has to be one of the best seasons because we're finally getting that reveal of Lex finally becoming that evil antagonist that we've been all waiting for the entire show, and the show makes that scene really well done. Lex's turning point is killing his own father, the one man that turned his life around and helping Clark. Throughout the show we discovered that Lana Luthor also learns about Clark's true purpose and intentions. And Lex, being dark, wants to learn that, and Lionel is too reserved, and that's one of the reasons why Lionel dies in the show, because Lex is tired of people lying to him. But the last 3 seasons has to be like a climb out towards the climax of the show. So we see that in season 8 we discovered that Lex somehow dies, and that turns into a whole storyline of introducing a new character to the show as Mercer, which I know that is Lex's sidekick, which I think she is like a combination of a lot of characters merged to one, like Mercy, which is the assistant of Lex Luthor from the comics, as well as Lana Luthor, that we know from the Supergirl show. Like towards season 8, like she starts up to being the villain, but towards the season 9 and season 10, like she becomes more of a hero and she discovers Clark's true identity. The whole show is amazing. Like towards the final act of the show, we finally get the plot of an early Superman. In season 8 and season 9, Clark starts to wear like an early version of his Superman costume. He's wearing a black Superman shirt with a trench coat and saving people from the shadow. That has been one of the few best seasons because we're finally getting more of that superhero element. The best seasons by far this year has been season 9 and 10, the final 2 seasons. It's getting to the point of the relationship between Lois and Clark and becoming a couple, and they finally getting married in season 10. The whole chemistry between Lois and Clark has to be the best thing I've seen. Smallville has to have the best relationship between Lois and Clark. This whole show has been incredible. If you haven't watched the show, then I highly recommend. After doing this video, I'm eager to rewatch the show again because there are so many good episodes in this show that it's hard to pick my favorite episode. But throughout the entire show, we see fun cameos, Satara in a few episodes, and like the best cameos in the show has to be the late Christopher Reeves has been a mentor figure towards Clark Kent. The entire show is great. Like, if you haven't seen the show, you have to watch it because it's great. I'm giving this show a 9 out of 10. If I didn't have the errors, this has to be my favorite show to watch. If you enjoy what you can hit that subscribe button and bell to be notified for whenever I post. And I will see you guys in my next video. Peace.